In this week's episode, we are joined by Niamh Shaw, a woman on a mission to reach the stars. This episode is brought to you by Top Drawer Talent, the supply chain procurement recruitment specialist. Here we go. So today I'm joined by Niamh Shaw, a PhD, a performer, and a space advocate, or someone who's looking to get
Absolutely.
to space as
Yep.
soon as possible.
Yep.
But thanks very much for joining us today, Niamh.
Thanks, Connor.
It's always a bit awkward, isn't it? This
It's
first
like, where
intro.
do we
I
start?
have to be talking for so long.
I know.
But yeah, so look, who is Niamh Shaw?
Oh my God. Who is Niamh Shaw? I think I'm driven by my curiosity all my life. The thing that has been the constant in all those things you just said. It was just, I just love learning. I love understanding things and I love people.
Okay.
And that's really it. And that's kind of been the story of my life. And I really want to do something of value with my life, and that's kind of also been something that's really driven me and made me make some strong decisions along the way. Walk away from some nice sort of reliable work.
Okay.
I knew I had to step away in order to kind of do the bigger thing.
Brilliant. And going way back, right? Because
Yeah.
you've done the PhD,
Yeah.
but going back to kind of secondary school.
Yeah.
How was school? How did you find it?
Loved school. Absolutely loved school. School was a very stabling thing for me. I would say, like, family was great, but there was a tension in the house, for want of a better word.
Okay.
And so the one thing I could control was my homework and my school life. So that was mine. So I really lent into that, and so I loved the rigor of it. I loved the routine of it. I'd get up every morning. I'd make a little flask of cocoa.
Okay.
Make my lunch.
Yeah.
Always leave the house at the same time. Get the bus and had everything. Love doing my homework every night and everything. So that was mine. That was the only thing I had that was mine when I was growing up. So it was that's why it gave me great confidence and a great sense of self-worth.
Okay, that's good. And did you see it all the way through to leaving cert then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. It got tougher.
Yeah.
It got tougher, and I had a bit of a low when I was around fifth year because I don't know, I just started kind of wondering what it was all about, because I was a very kind of positive kid bouncing around. And then when kind of adolescence kicked in, I was sort of like, what's the purpose? Like I was always thinking, I was going, what is the purpose of our existence? I think I had my first existential crisis at kind of 15. It just seemed like, because I realized that it was just like, oh, I'm going to do a course and then I'm going to work. And I'm kind of going, there has to be more than that. And that's when I started kind of thinking about, I have to do more than just make money. It just didn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
Life started not making much sense to me from about the age of 15.
Okay. And did you know then, when you were that age, what you wanted to do or what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I knew younger, so before the existential crisis.
Okay.
As I say, I loved facts, loved information, and in our house we talked an awful lot about, well, Dad and John is my brother, they talked about history, didn't like history, but when we talked about science, I loved it. We used to watch like David Attenborough, which I loved, and we used to watch science fiction. We used to watch like Doctor Who, and there was other programs called Blake 7 for the older people that are watching. And so science and space were like my absolute favorite subjects, and from a really young age, like I wanted to go to space. Like it was something I really wanted to do. But by the time you get to secondary school, that had all just disappeared.
Oh, okay. So, like the space side of things, it wouldn't have been on the curriculum when you were in school?
No, and there was nobody around. Like as I always say, there wasn't anyone walking around Dundalk Shopping Centre in a spacesuit. You know what I mean? So there was no. I didn't know that any women had been to space. I knew that men had been on the moon.
Yeah.
But and I knew about science fiction, but I hadn't actually seen a female scientist. The one role model that I saw that I thought was amazing was Princess Leia on Star Wars. I remember seeing her when I was about 7.
Right.
But the dream to be, to kind of do something really adventurous was there from the age of 8. But by the time you go into the school system, your first kind of stumbling block, if you're kind of a free thinker, like I think I was, is the CAO. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're looking through these courses, you need 100 points and you're doing, machinery of machines, blah, 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 blah. And it's like snooze fests. And there was nothing in it. Like communications was the closest thing that I could find that kind of matched, because I was already acting and everything there when I was a kid. So I didn't even have one conscious thought about space by the time I was 15. It was gone. That passion was parked somewhere. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know anyone who was doing anything about space. So it was just gone.
Okay. And the dance side of things, was that like a thing that was facilitated in the school, or is that like an after school
Well,
activity that you've
it was
done?
dance and performance and singing. You couldn't get me off the stage. Like anytime there was a sing along, I'd do it as
Okay.
well. I did Irish dancing in primary school. I always did acting. Like I'd write plays and stuff in the house. We do like a
Oh, okay.
Christmas pageant every Christmas. I'd drag all the family into it. And then I was in the town musical society when I was like 12 and 13.
Right.
And then when I was studying, after I finished my degree, then I kind of got into amateur acting. So it was there all the time, just in the background. It was never encouraged to be a career. So it was sort of like, no, you don't do that for a job.
It's more of a hobby.
Yeah, more of a hobby. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and you mentioned earlier you had your first job at 11.
I made my first job at
What
11,
was
yeah.
your job?
I love tills. I love like
Yeah, the shopping.
shopping tills, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to work in a shop. So there was this shop on Park Street in Dundalk, and it was called I can't even remember the name of it now. And it was a sweet shop and it was a toy shop, and they employed children. I don't know how they got away with it, but they did.
Cheap labour.
It was cheap labour. It was like £7 a day or something.
Whoa.
And I loved it. I just loved because I love being behind the till. And then because I had that job, then I would get other part-time jobs in other places. So there was Oriel Park is like a football pitch in Dundalk. So
Yeah.
it's where, soccer and stuff is played. And so there was a shop in front of that. So on the nights that there was games on, I would be behind the till, and I just love the bing, 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 bing. And I've always taken part-time jobs and anything to do with, I go, is there a till? Yes, I'll do it. I love tills.
Get you working in the local centre.
Bink, bink. I worked at Marks and Spencer's. Just anything with a till. Love it.
Okay, so that was you really enjoyed it. That's good.
It's mental, but it's just the whole, I don't know. Because
That
when I
works.
was a kid, I used to collect empty bags of sugar and empty
Right.
cereal bags, and I pretended I had a shop.
Okay, little pretend shop back in the house. Okay.
Loads of people do that. I loved it.
Yeah. And then, so why then did you decide to go and study engineering after, like,
Well, I
you're a
came out-
performer,
yeah.
you like the
So-
retail side of things?
So you're in the 80s. There
Yeah.
was a recession, right?
Okay.
And in fairness to Ireland, everybody got a really good education, and I got the grant. So the only way I got to go to college was I got the grant. So every county, you get like maintenance, you get like a bit of money for living, and then you get your fees covered. And so Mum and Dad never went to college, and it was really important for them that we were set up for life, and Dad was working in a factory, and he could see that engineers were kind of the senior people in his area of business. So we were told to do engineering. And I had a good logical brain. Like I did like taking things apart, and I did like logically working things out. But there's this whole other creative part of me. And so I wanted to do communications in DCU, and they were like, no, don't be doing that now. Do engineering. So I did engineering. I was just okay. I was average, very average.
So the family kind of pushed you in that direction.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. And I'm really glad I did it, because it's the great thing about doing engineering is you learn. You just don't worry about how anything works. You know that you'll eventually figure it out. So you approach things with like, we'll definitely figure it out. And it's that can-do attitude that I got from the degree. But when I went to work, couldn't. I used to just like, I would try jobs and I just run away. I hated it. I hated
really?
working. Yeah, because it was just like, what is the point? I was working on a butter production line, and I was going, kill me, because you were just going in and you're like, efficiency is down by 20%, and I go, I don't care.
Get me out of here. Okay.
It was just, I was always looking for like a bigger life purpose,
Okay.
I just couldn't do a job where that's kind of, what is the point? And then I got jobs working in computer places because I wasn't a bad coder. And again, I remember the owner of the company, I go, I don't get it. What's the point? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you're just putting a fancy front end on something. Who cares? And he was just like shocked, because he was trying to make money. And I was there going, sorry, no life purpose here.
Yeah. Okay. So you weren't motivated by money side of
No,
things. It was all
no,
about
it was always
purpose.
about like impact for me,
Okay.
I didn't know it.
And
then.
swinging back to the degree, right?
Yeah.
What the main subjects that you would have needed there would have been like maths, would it be?
Maths is the main one, and like science is one of the sciences. So physics, I did physics and chemistry. Loved chemistry. Loved English. Absolutely loved English. And so you had to have that. You had to have honours maths at the time.
And then how did you learn how to code then? Where did that?
Well, this is really funny. So again, in the 80s, home computers were just coming in.
Okay.
And so there was kind of two rivals. There was the Commodore 64 or the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. And we had the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which was literally just a circuit board with like a really small keyboard. And then you plugged it into the back of your TV. And you would buy magazines, and the magazines would have lines of code, and then when it worked, you'd get a game. Like, so you spend like 2 days, print, space, asterisk, and you do like all this code, and then it wouldn't work. And like, I wasn't going to waste 2 days, so I would go through it, and more than likely there was an typing error in the magazine. I'd fix it, and ta-da! So I taught myself basic, and then you just, once you know one language, they all kind of are the same.
What language was it?
That was basic. It was just basic. Okay. Yeah. But then Fortran I did in college then.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you done 2 degrees, right?
Then I did a master's. Then I did a master's. Yeah. So then, because I was working in this butter factory, I was like, so depressed. And then I went back to college and did a master's, and I did ag and food engineering, which is now called biosystems. So that was all about living systems, because I felt it was more sciencey than engineering-y, and it was interesting. So you learned, so it was much about like farming and the food business as it was about engineering. So my master's then was in something similar to that.
Right. Okay. And the butter factory, what were you doing there? Were you just on the production line? Were you managing the production line? Were you managing efficiencies?
So the masters, the masters was the butter production line. So basically, they wanted to check for contaminants. I mean, I'm so bored even talking about contaminants in their butter.
Okay.
And so, like, they wanted to make sure there was no glass or like any remnants from the vat where the butter was made. So I went and trialed a new contaminant detection system. It was using x-rays. That was kind of fun. And then all I had to do was just like test it. So I had all the different products, and I had about 6 or 7 different types of contaminants at different sizes, and I would just like run them through the machine and wait for them to beep so that they could be so I knew they had been connected. And I just did a load of stats. I hated it.
Okay. Was it part-time or was it full-time?
Well, it's full-time, like it's 2 years, and you get, you've got a grant, and you've got funding to do it, and but it just taught you that was the first time I got exposed to the academic process, which is all about writing up your thesis and standing up and giving a presentation about your work at these conferences and stuff. So I started learning about the culture of research, basically. Okay. And so it kind of started me into that.
And is that then what led into the PhD?
That's what led into the PhD, because I preferred that than the factory. It was like, oh my God. Oh my God, I hated the factory so much.
Keep you away from factories.
Oh my God. It was just like...
Did you ever work in a factory after? Or?
I loved it, yeah. I had a part-time job when I was in... after I finished my degree, I went to Australia for the year, and I worked in this turning shop, which was brilliant. So that was a place that had lathes, and they were making screws, and they had like flatheads and Phillips heads, right? And so my job was literally to just put the flathead on the top of the screw. I could have done that forever. Yeah. And, I cleaned the screws, and I'd work on the lathe. They actually asked me to do an apprenticeship there. I loved it so much. And I was like, no, I'm just traveling. No, please stay. No, I'm just traveling. I loved it. But that's because it was with your hands. But in the factories, there was a lot of like paperwork, and it just, nothing. And it was all about profitability. It's just nothing motivated me in that. Right. But the PhD I loved the PhD because you're like a detective. And so my PhD...
What was the PhD in?
Yeah, sorry. So in milk, the nursery rhyme, Little Miss Muffet sat in her tuffet eating her curds and whey. So there are 2 proteins in milk. So whey, of course, now is really whey protein for weightlifting and for nutrition and stuff. But when I was doing my PhD, curds was the high value protein of milk, because they would use that for making cheese, and nobody knew. They said they had whey mountains in the EU. Nobody knew what to do with whey, because nobody had started bodybuilding really then. They were kind of trying to find any excuse to use whey, and they had been looking at using whey to make biodegradable packaging, it really, I liked it because it was about environmentalism. Yeah. It was basically a packaging that would disintegrate when you heat it, so there was no waste. And so my PhD was on making biodegradable films using whey protein from milk.
Oh, okay.
So it was cool. So I made these thin films. They were kind of like massive sort of contact lenses.
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea was that you would put them between layers of food. So this is where you're going to fall asleep
No,
again.
come on.
But for instance,
You're
in a
okay.
pizza,
Yeah.
in pizza manufacture, you have the dough and then
Yeah.
you have the tomato layer and then you have the toppings, right?
Yeah.
So in a factory where you're mass producing pizzas, so you have the dough and then you have the tomato paste straight ahead. So a lot of the time the tomato paste seeps into the dough. So the quality of the product wouldn't be as good as buying a pizza in, say, in a restaurant. So by putting one of my edible films between the tomato layer and the pastry layer would mean that you wouldn't have that movement of tomato paste into the dough layer. So it would disintegrate upon cooking, which means that it would be more like a fresh pizza.
Oh, okay. Is that still in place today, or?
Yeah. No, and then edible films, when you really saw them do you remember there was a time you could get those breath fresheners that were like pieces of plastic?
Yes,
that you could That's exactly what I made. It's stuff like that would just basically disintegrate in water or with heat.
Oh, okay. Interesting stuff.
I really enjoyed my PhD. I really did. It was brilliant because you could just you were just burrowing down and you were lost in trying to figure it out. It was like a detective. You were like trying to be a detective.
And was that the only project then that you worked on, or
That was the only thing I worked on for 4 years. So 3 years of work in the lab, and you're trying to measure it and pull it and figure out how permeable it is to water. And then the last year was pretty horrific. So now it was the write up, and that was just awful.
Okay.
Again, but yeah, it just isn't my buzz, because people who are really good researchers work at a very slow pace, and they're very much into detail. And I'm I'm just I just have attention deficit when it comes to research. For me, it's about the macro, not the micro.
Okay.
Things don't move fast enough for me,
Okay.
And that's when I started getting into trouble once I finished my PhD.
Okay. So after the PhD, and you've kind of implemented whatever the micro.
My edible films.
Edible films.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to call them microplastics. That's not what it is. But where did you end up then after the PhD?
So then what happens then is, so the academic system is basically the whole idea is that when you do a PhD, you're basically saying this is the groundwork for me to have a full-time career in research. So you usually work in a university or a research department, and it's a very straight hierarchy. So you work on a project that's funded, and you kind of swim around for a bit until you get a lecturing job. And that's kind of what you're trying to do. Right. And they're called postdoc. So it's after your doctorate. So postdoctorate. And so that's when I was like, I made a massive mistake, because I worked on a project, and it was on fish, and it was really interesting, and the group was really great. But again, I was left completely on my own. It was completely, I had to motivate myself. The PhD is different because you're looking at trying to get your doctorate, whereas when you're doing something like that, there's an awful lot of paperwork. You got to apply for funding. You got to manage other students who are doing masters. You have to kind of publish your results, and so a lot of admin and a bit of lab. And it was I just found that I was on my own far too much, and I was like, I don't like this. I do not like this at all.
And do you know when you're doing a postdoc, is that paid?
It's paid, yeah. It's not very well paid, but it is paid.
Okay.
It is paid. And when you're doing your PhD, you're on the clippings of tin. So I had been in a student kind of mode for nearly 14 years. Okay. And so then the postdoc, it feels like a lot of money, but it's not there is a big problem with the research system, is that postdocs are kind of stuck because there's not enough teaching posts or kind of head of department posts for postdocs. So they're stuck in this weird sort of kind of Middle Earth kind of thing where they just have to wait their time. But you can get burnt out very quickly. They're kind of treated as the lowest rung in the research ladder, and yet they are the working horse of any research department. So it's a lot of hard work and not much gratification.
Right. And are they funded? Are these kind of funded by companies or government bodies?
Usually government bodies. So Europe kind of has these Europe-wide initiatives, and you have to do these huge funding applications. They take weeks to do, and you have to partner with different institutes. So mine was an EU funded EU framework, and they've got different numbers and stuff, and ours came out of the Department of Agriculture. And then you've got these Horizon projects, and they're these massive projects that go right across Europe. And you're doing work package 5.2.1, and everybody together has to finish all the work packages, and you have to present it then to the EU and everything. So it's a huge amount of work.
Okay.
But again, I was kind of going, so what? It was very much the so what
So
was always my issue.
it's kind of ringing. So, do you decide to leave then, or where do you go?
So what happened then was I was at a kind of a career sort of crossroads. So a couple of things happened, and it was a good thing in a way. So I was married briefly, and during the PhD, it became very clear to me that I wasn't happy in that marriage either. And so during the write up, it just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing my postdoc, it was like, oh my God, because I had burnt myself out to get my PhD, and then I had gone into this. And then I think I was just feeling very guilty, because there's all this, well, certainly then there was a kind of shame around marriage breakdown and stuff like that. And I think in a way I had a sort of, a sort of a break in the matrix, for want of a better word. I wouldn't say it was a breakdown, but I would say it was just some sort of like crack where I went, what am I doing? And it was the first time I ever stopped to think about, well, what do I want to do with my life? I had been a very compliant child. I'd been a very compliant student in school. I tended to do what people told me to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how I ended up doing engineering, doing the PhD, doing the postdoc, because I kept waiting for people to tell me what to be, which is, when you're a compliant person, that's our biggest failing, is that we tend not to take control of our lives early enough. And so I was in my 30s and I was like, what do I want to do? And I was so disillusioned and burnt out with science. All the time I had been, like when I was doing my master's, doing all those, checking all those contaminants in butter. I used to was very heavily involved in amateur drama. And I was like, why don't I just act for a while? And so I stepped away from all of science and I became an actor for a couple of years.
Did you keep up the acting during the PhD and the postdoc, or did you step away from it?
I did during the postdoc, and that's why I kind of went, I should do this. So the postdoc, so I was down in Cork at that time, and I started acting again, and I just loved it, and I was getting loads of parts and everything, and I said, I think I'm going to go for this as a career and see what happens. So that's what I did. And so I became an actor for a few years, and I didn't tell anyone about my background because I was convinced it was going to go against castings and stuff.
So what was the first play then you got cast in, or acting job that you got?
It was a play called Soap, and it was brilliant. It was written it was for the Fringe Festival and the Cork Midsummer Festival, and it was a 10-part half-hour show, which was a parody of all the different types of soap opera that are on, like, so Neighbours, Home and Away, Coronation Street, Fair City. And so there was different characters meeting in those different styles every day. And I played about 20 characters. We all played about 20 characters each. And it was brilliant.
It's good fun,
I loved it. And that kind of got me an agent, and I suddenly was an actor.
Okay. Did you play in any major films, or?
I was in a few films. I was in a film with Aidan Quinn called China Rainbows. And then I met, what's her name, who was in Fatal Attraction, Glenn Close. Met Glenn Close. She did her production Albert Nobbs here. Right. And I was down to the last one or two for one of the characters in that. Didn't get it in the end because I didn't have a big enough profile. And then everybody has a stint on Fair City. Yeah. I was in Fair City for the guts of a year.
Oh, okay. How did you find acting on Fair City? Did you enjoy it? Or?
It's full on.
Yeah.
It's really pressured.
Is it a tough gig? Like,
very tough.
You have to, like, new lines every day kind of thing, or?
So you get your scripts for the week. So depending on your characters, like sometimes you're just background when you're going, here's your coffee. Oh, thanks very much. And that's like all you have to do for a whole day.
Yeah.
But if you're the main storyline, you've got at least, like, I remember in the height of when I was kind of the main storyline, you've got about like 17 scenes a day to shoot, and they have a really fast turnaround because they have to get out at least one episode a week, and you're doing it. It's full on.
I imagine so. What character did you play, or what was your storyline?
My name was Sister Francis. So this is way back. It was like the late 2000s. So there was a character called Tracy, and she was a heroin addict, recovering heroin addict. Yeah. And so she married this guy, Dominic was his name. Yeah. And so she had written to her long-lost sister who was in the Congo as a missionary to come to the wedding. And, Dominic did. That's right. Her new husband did. And I turn up on the day of the wedding as a surprise. And I don't go away. I kind of stay for the guts of a year. So it's my character and what happened to me and my post-traumatic stress disorder from being in the Congo and all these crazy storylines which always happen in Fair City.
And did they kill you off in the end, or?
Well, it's worse than that. I went away in a taxi. That's worse than being killed in Fair
At least
City.
you can go back.
Yeah, you never go back though. The taxi is the death.
Yeah.
The taxi is the death
Like,
of
no.
the character.
Where did you end up then after Fair City then? Where did you go?
Well, cryogenically frozen in the backlot of Fair City, even now as I speak.
They still have you in an
Francis
elbow.
is there, like, like the Matrix or something,
Yeah.
plugged into some pod. Where did I go then? Well, then you're lost, like, because the thing
Okay.
about Fair City is you get really comfortable. The pay was really good
Yeah.
compared to, like, acting. And so you get this awful fright when suddenly your character's gone, because you kind of get used to the routine. You kind of do blocks. They kind of tell you how many blocks, how many weeks you have in the year. And so you kind of know
What you're
your
gonna do.
year, and then it's gone. And then what was really good was then I started getting more and more involved in theatre.
Oh, okay.
And I started working with a great theatre company who were just emerging at the time. And this is when I finally revealed my double life as an engineer and scientist. And they were very progressive, and they thought it was amazing that I had all this knowledge.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to bring it into the rehearsal room. And that was the first time I started bringing science and performance together.
Okay. Did you play a role then, mixing both, or? what?
Yeah, so we got like at that level. So they're kind of an avant-garde theatre company.
Yeah.
And so they had amazing opportunities. So we went to this. They got a residency in the Hamptons in New York with this really wealthy theatre director called Robert Wilson,
Okay.
and he has his home there. And the ground floor and a separate wing is for artists to come and work on something. So I went with them, and we were looking at an old Irish text or something. And that was the first time I started using science and art together. And I performed like a theory, kind of a chemical theory about obsessional love and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then because I was connected with them,
Yeah.
you can apply for things. And because you're connected with success, people then automatically give you opportunities. And then suddenly I had the opportunity for the Fringe Festival in 2011 to make my first theatre show about science. And so this was where I was bringing the two worlds together. And that was when it all really started.
Okay. Did you get to travel and spend some time in the US, or?
I did, yeah. That
How
was in
long
New York
did you get
State.
to
So that
spend?
was 3.5 weeks in the US.
Okay.
So that was really good.
Nice.
And then in 2006, I went to the US to study film acting as well for about a month or two.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you find like life in the US? Would you stay there? Have you got good acting gig, or would you have always kind of been called back to?
I actually ended up I was married second time around. I got married again last year, and he's an American. So
Oh,
there you go.
congratulations.
But yeah, I would have loved to have, because it's a real business there, and there's loads of opportunities and stuff. And
Yeah.
they really liked me. You had a few castings, and I met the people that at the time were casting. They were casting Friends, and they were casting The Big Bang Theory. It was just starting, and they really saw me. They saw me as very. They hadn't brought in the women into the series. You know The Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, I know the program.
Sheldon's girlfriend, I can't remember her name, and he becomes his wife. Whatever her name was, they were looking at me for that. But without a green card, you just don't go anywhere.
Oh, okay.
They liked the fact that I was an actual scientist for that, which she is as well. She's a doctorate too.
Okay. Maybe they could bring you back. You never know. You're married to America now.
You'll have to defrost me from the RTE backlot first.
We get you another stint on Fair City first.
That's right. And then wheel me out.
But Grant. So, and then what was the play then at the Fringe Festival?
The play was something I had been thinking about for years, which is the whole idea of. So I'm going to do a bit of science now, right? Because if you understand this, then it kind of blew my mind. So in science, even in school, I used to find atoms amazing, and the periodic table is something that you do in chemistry. So what basically atoms are about is like every single thing, like your jumper, your face, your glasses, the floor, the microphones, everything is made up of atoms. And depending on how many there are and how they all work together, you end up with a microphone or a pair of jeans or whatever. But if you could actually see things, if you had a microscope strong enough, there wouldn't be any distinction between the atoms that make up us as people and your genes and your microphone and stuff. And so we think we're solid, but actually we're not solid at all. There isn't anything solid. And it kind of blew me away. It made me realize like that my body is just like a mesh I'm just like this mesh of atoms. And then there is amazing research being done where they're actually smashing atoms to find out, well, what are atoms made of? And that's happening in a place in Switzerland called CERN. And they have this huge ring that's 26 kilometers that goes underneath Switzerland and France, and I think a little bit of Germany too. And they just basically bombard a part of an atom together. And at the time, they were trying to figure out this one force that gives kind of mass to these atoms. And there's some beautiful theories, and one of the theories was really like thinking about your life choices effectively. And that show looked at that from a mathematical point of view, but I also explained this makes me think about my life choices and when I made major decisions. And from a mathematical point of view, and if this theory is ever proven right, it would suggest that every time you make a decision, the alternative choice continues. So you have a choice to go back. If you could travel back in time or travel forward, you could hop across from one life choice to the other. So that was the theory of the show. And when I was looking at that, I was looking at the person that stayed on in science, the person that that stayed married and had kids, the person that wanted to be a ballerina when she was growing up, the person that wanted to be an astronaut when she was growing up. And so I made movies as if all these people were still existing. And when I made the person that wanted to go to space, which goes back to my 8-year-old me, I realised that I'd completely forgotten about it and I'd done nothing about it. And I was really, really sad. And I was in a creative kind of environment at the time. And then it became obvious to me that had to be my second show.
Oh, okay. So it's like the alternative universe almost.
It's like all these alternative options.
Yeah.
And I went into future me. My mother played future me. And I said, did you go to space? And she's playing on the organ. She goes, yes, I did. Yes. And so it was like, what's stopping me? And it really made me go, right, I'm made of mush. I'm made of these atoms. So like if I could see myself on that level, sure, what does it matter what I do? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Yeah. If you see yourself as really small, and then when you see yourself from space and when you see yourself on that level, you're just this mush of atoms and you're huge because you've all these atoms together. And then from space, you're really small. What are we worrying about? And so I went, you know what, I'm going to go for broke and I'm going to pursue this space thing. Because I really want to understand. Here's me, I've done my PhD, I've done this, I've done parachute jumps and everything. I've always thought like I'm fearless in everything that I've done. But the one thing I wanted to do, I didn't do anything about it. Why was that?
Yeah.
And it's the Irish thing, isn't it? Waiting for permission, and you don't be getting notions. You're only from a modest house. Someone like you doesn't get to have that life. And then I was like, well, why can't someone like me have that life? Yeah. And that was a creative experiment initially, but actually my whole life just took off the moment I started pursuing that.
Brilliant. And you're getting Eve to space.
Yeah.
That's the book, is it? Or
the book is Dream Big, and it's about like everything that happened up until then, and then all the amazing space related things that literally just came to me.
Okay, so where are we at now in getting Eve to space?
Well, I mean, now I want to be I want to be a reporter, so I want to report live from like the International Space Station or something. You know what I mean? Because I'm writing more now and I'm communicating more. Like, so I report for I was on prime time there last week reporting about the first private spacewalk, and I write articles for the Irish Times and I write articles for magazines, and I have a press pass to go to cover launches of crew, and the European Space Agency would know me very well. So it's literally just waiting for an opportunity for some philanthropist to go, we have to put someone like Niamh up. Why me? Because what I do that's different from other people is whenever I go on my adventures, so I pretended to be on Mars for 15 days in the desert, and I approached it because it's true, because I was completely untrained. So I went in as somebody from a small housing estate in Dundalk with that set of eyes. And that set of eyes tells a very different story from a set of eyes of somebody who's just a geologist or something like that. They're coming at it from a very scientific point of view. Yeah. And so I can bring science and these really dense science subjects and space subjects to everyday people, because I'm coming in like I'm not supposed to be here, as I say, like an accidental explorer. Okay. And so I want to go to space because I want to share what it's like, how dangerous it is, and how how merciless
Yeah.
space is in the absence of oxygen and gravity and all the things we need to live. And just sort of share how terrifying it is and give a perspective so that we can kind of appreciate our amazing planet.
Okay.
So that's the theory and that's what I want to do.
Right.
And I just need an opportunity now.
Okay, so it's not like you want to get onto like a Virgin Galactic flight and kind of just travel to the outside of.
I would do it, but
Okay.
I really want to
that's
do it
not-
longer. I mean, absolutely, I do
Yeah.
it and I'm reporting it and I take it in a heartbeat.
Okay.
But it's not the act of doing; it's the act of experiencing and writing, and having loads of conversations so that people know me before I go. Because I always think about every time I give a talk. So I give loads of talks now, right? And I go into schools and I work with adults on science learning, and I try to identify people who have a poor relationship with their learning, because that was the one thing that I always had a good relationship with. And I'm doing that on purpose so that when I get to report from space, I want people to know me really well and to have a kind of like, oh my God,
She did it.
she did it.
Yeah.
And then I come back and I continue the conversation as if it's the most normal thing in the world, because I want to break down those barriers that we all have about ourselves in, that I can't do that. That's not for me. And that's what I suffered from a lot, is a lack of confidence. Even though I had lots of capabilities, I didn't believe I had any capabilities for a very long time. And that held me back. And I think I'm not alone. I think there are a lot of people who are the same as me. And so maybe if they see someone do something mental and also be really brave to say, I'm trying to do this mental thing. Firstly, creatively, I've set myself a life experiment just to see what happens when you make the impossible possible.
Yeah.
But secondly, this is what I've always wanted to do. Like, this is what 8-year-old me wanted to do. And I really want to see that view of Earth from space, because astronauts say it's like life-changing. And so if I go up and I'm like a really rubbish passenger, vomiting, flying all over the place, having headaches, and because it's really hard on your body, and not shy away from it, but actually share it and be crying and be afraid and stuff, and then get that view. I just think it's more relatable. And then all the work that I'm doing on the ground and talking to people and meeting people and trying to talk to them about science and everything, that I have a whole network of friends, like thousands and thousands and thousands of friends who felt just as limited as I did. That if they see me do it, then they'll go, "Feck it, I'm going back to college, or I'm going to be a teacher, or I want to drive that bus, or I want to be a florist," or
Yeah. If you didn't have someone guiding you back home, okay, what do you think you would have pursued that a lot sooner, or do you think you would have just ended up, just a regular kind of typical
I
Irish
think
life? I suppose. Is how would you describe?
what
I don't know how
I
to
what
describe
I
it.
didn't get growing up was a lot of positive reinforcement, and it just
Okay.
I think parenting is much more hands on now than it was in the we're Gen X, right? So Gen X was like, if you're holding that knife, be sure not to cut yourself, like that was it, and you were just kicked out the door, and there would be a knock on the window to come in for dinner. That was it. Like you were just left, and so the interest and investment that parents have in their kids now is fantastic.
Yeah.
So my parents did the best they could, but the one thing that all of us lacked as Gen X was there was nobody really rooting for you. So you never really there was a few exceptional kids whose parents kind of knew the system and they knew how to help their kids, but most of us hadn't a clue.
Hang on, that,
And that's the thing that was my biggest stumbling block, just a lack of confidence in myself.
Okay. And then, did you find then, right? Because I know when I went to college, that kind of gave me the confidence to kind of move on. But I don't necessarily think academia is for everybody, or that
No,
it's
it's not.
necessary to succeed. But do you find that doing the PhD and getting to that breaking point, you're just like, just fuck this, no, it's not for me. That gave you the confidence to kind of pursue what you wanted to do, or you know,
I think it was the breaking. I think it was the letting go, actually, Connor.
okay,
Because I had controlled my life to the point of like, ringing it.
yeah,
And I was always trying to control everything. I was an anxious person. I didn't know it then, but I know it now.
Yeah.
I was an anxious person, and I was trying to control my world, and I had to get 90%. Everything had to be perfect. And when everything kind of went wrong, it was the best. While it was awful at the time, it was actually the best thing ever, because I had to just like let go.
okay,
And acting and all the creative pursuits, you have to let go. You have, in order to create, you have to stop judging, and you can't control what you're going to write. You can't control, you talk to musicians or you talk to artists or anything. You have no idea where you're going. You just know that you're feeling something. And that's a very different skill. And once I started tapping into that skill, I started kind of going, I'm just going to let go. Just let go, let go, let go, let go, let go.
Okay.
And at the same time, kind of then have a little plan in your head. And my problem was I never had a destination in mind. And once that space thing happened, that was it. I
Okay.
got focused.
Laser focused.
Got laser focused, yeah.
Brilliant. Did you do any kind of like mindset training, or was it like the acting that helped, like the improv, like,
Improv helped a lot because just embracing failure
Yeah.
and not taking yourself seriously. And when you get up on stage every night for 13 years, every Friday night for 13 years, you get to know people very well, and you realize that what people really want is for you to just be relaxed
Yeah.
and to connect. And that's helped me no end in speaking, and it's helped me no end in sharing my story with people. And whenever I go in and I talk about science with schools or adults or whatever, and also it's helped me kind of share why this is important to me. I can open my heart. I didn't know how to do that before.
Okay. And what's next now for Niamh, right?
Well, I feel really blessed. I feel like
Yeah.
I have the most amazing life now. I met an amazing man, and I know that that doesn't mean like, oh, I have to have a man to be
No,
perfect.
no.
No, but it was the piece that was missing really. And, he's really kind of opened me up an awful lot more and made me more available to people, I think. So what's next is to continue to write. I've got my own podcast, which I started during the pandemic, and then huge amount of self-doubt. I stopped it, and now I'm kind of starting it up again. But just to keep doing what I'm doing, and I have to be braver in being seen more
Yeah.
outside of Ireland, and to, like, I know when I put myself out there, people connect with me. I think being Irish, everybody loves the Irish,
Yeah.
and I think we're a very authentic, I think we're authentic people, and I
Definitely.
think we make people feel relaxed, and I think we're self-deprecating, which I think is a lovely skill to have.
Yeah.
And just keep doing what I'm doing, and I believe it's only a matter of time. I would say in the next 5 years, they're going to want to put a reporter or a couple of reporters in space. I just have to make sure I'm on that list.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure you will be. If you want it, you'll go get it.
Yeah.
But, what advice then would you give to somebody, right, that's stuck in their own head, or listening to their parents? Not that you shouldn't listen to your parents.
Well, your
but
parents mean well as well. Yeah.
but like, you have to chase your own goals, right?
You have to chase your
and
own
you have
goals,
to
yeah.
know what you want, and if you know what you want, you should chase it.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give to someone that's stuck or letting someone else hold them back?
I would say a bit of mindfulness is very helpful. Like, slow down the mind. Be careful of your routine. I would say, like, have a healthy routine, because I think when you're stuck in a rut, you tend to do that thing. I love that word bed rot. That bed rot thing that they talk about, people spending all day on TikTok on a Sunday and not even getting out, like eating in the bed and everything. That's what I call bed rot.
Yeah.
And, I know that feeling. And
Yeah.
sometimes I get it from time to time when I just am really tired and stuff. I get it. So just mind yourself and try and just firstly get into like a healthy frame of mind for yourself, whatever that means for yourself. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
And what is it that gives you butterflies in your stomach? Is it music?
Yeah.
Is it reading? Is it watching movies? Is it performing? Is it like figuring something out? Is it welding something? Is it gardening? Because the answer is in the stuff that gives you the butterflies in your stomach. That's your passion. And if you have a passion, the money will follow. I also think it's really important to kind of figure out what your values are. And if you can't work in a job if they don't match your values. So this goes back to the butter factory, right? I'm not saying those people there, I think they were all getting their rocks off trying to increase productivity.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me.
Okay.
because my values
Yeah.
are very, I have a very strong social conscience, but I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing something that feels like you're changing the world, everything feels like these people are insane. So you have to figure out what your values are. So what is it? What are you drawn to? And if you don't know what your values are, what kind of people are you drawn to? Because whoever you're drawn to, more than likely they have values that you really admire and respect,
And someone, let's say, that doesn't know what they want to be
Yeah.
when they grow up,
Yeah.
right? Like, you kind of knew where you wanted to be,
Yeah, but
but it just took you
took me
a
30
while
years to figure it
to get
out.
there, right? But let's say someone that doesn't have a clue, what can they do to kind of find more information, to find out what they like, what
I
do you
think
think?
reach out to the people they admire. Like I've always
Yeah.
said that. So lots of teenagers and stuff would say that to me. So they'll say, I like music, but I also like welding. And I go, why can't you do both? You know, so like, I think this notion of one course is going to solve your problem. It's not. I think you have to embrace, I think it's really important actually for happiness to keep learning. You should never stop learning. And when you
Okay.
get good at something, it's time to leave the room and get into the next room where you're feeling uncomfortable. Like get out of your comfort zone. Be prepared to be really bad. You can't, anything worth mastering, it's impossible to be good at. But it's about consistency. And if you've a passion for something, it feels very easy because you want to do it anyway, and you'll keep getting better and better and better. And don't worry about the money. The money follows the skill or the mastering, But reach out to people that you admire. Reach out because I know I've met many astronauts and I've met many people in the space sector, and they answer every letter that they get from somebody, because when somebody shares your passion, all you want to do is help them.
Yeah.
It's really that easy. And if somebody writes you a really heartfelt letter or an email, I reply to everything. Anything people ever contact me about, I always because I know what it's like to be lost, and I wish I had the guts to reach out to people when I was at that stage where I really didn't know what I wanted to do.